All right, this is episode 4 of Reading with Ron, book 1 of Blood of the Prince, Greater Things Than Thou by R.L. Dean. Chapter 4. Heft was gone now. The old man sent him to Lady Osenna's residence in Whitefield with a letter of introduction. He long suspected Garrett descended from Denon's peerage, despite his protestations. The Lady Osenna was in a position to verify his suspicions and trace the sergeant's lineage. She would ensure that the boy married well, perhaps to a niece or country cousin or one of her ladies in waiting. Whoever it was, she would be pretty, healthy, and have money. Hef could stop trying to be his grandfather, Garrett, and become a father. I often wonder what made our forefathers migrate this far south and displace the people that formerly lived in Denon. There is a long and vibrant history recorded after they arrived here, but nothing before. When I was much younger and Siren sparked my curiosity with reading, I asked him about it, and he thought the history was recorded somewhere, but it's not in the Royal Archives in Whitefield. Between the two of us, we have over 70 years of experience in ferreting out scrolls in the dark stone corridors and cobwebbed shelves. If it was there, we would have found it. I did, however, find the origin story for the old man in the woods. Curious that Siren never showed it to me. He was a native living in the Grand Wood, resisting the logging attempts by our people. Those early villages and loggers were often attacked by the large gray wolves that roamed the area, and the old man in the woods was said to command them. Baby snatching was also attributed to him and his wolves as well. The stories and sightings of an old man, bedraggled, wide-eyed, and deer antlers tied to his head, persist in our written history long after he would have died. I didn't see any wolves on that trip, and by the time we reached the encampment, any idea that I was taken by the old man of the woods was gone. Baylor and his men were bandits. The pack horses carried things stolen from my village. The blood that still crusted some of the men's sword scabbards belonged to people that I knew, had once knew. That feeling, my heart pounding when we first came into the clearing, I remember it well. It was like a blacksmith's anvil was dropped on my chest. There was this sense of hopelessness. Whatever Baylor had planned for me was permanent. Like dogs soaked in the rain and forest muck, we entered the cluttered clearing. Gil had taken to making me ride in front of him so he could cuff me on his head more easily. And through the haze of rain and gloom from an overcast sky, I saw the stumps of trees, old and rotten, among the patches of green grass that broke the muddy cart and footpaths. A cluster of small cabins, ramshackled and falling apart, sit near a ditch that was overflowing its bank. It was a mud hole surrounded by a line of unbroken bramble and trees. As the horses trod closer to the cabins, I saw a fat man standing inside a doorway, his hands on the door frame, looking out at us. He spat and turned, disappearing inside. A few others opened doors and stood just inside watching us. Some even came out into the rain, pale-faced and dirty. Their expressions were haunted, depressing. "Smell that, boy?" Gil chuckled. "I did. It was sewage from the ditch. Take a deep breath. That's the smell of your new home." His chuckle faded with an edge of bitterness. Baylor yelled hoarsely and stopped near the ditch. The others sort of piled up around him and dismounted. By the time Gil's skinny horse made it to them, several men had come from the houses to take the pack horses. Gil jumped down and started walking towards Baylor. He turned for a moment and glared at me before continuing through the mud. I watched Baylor gregariously greet another man, then they clapped each other on the back and smiled like old friends. They talked, but I couldn't hear them. How many times had Baylor left with blood on his mind and returned with laden horses? I decided they were discussing Baylor's success at destroying my home and killing everyone I knew. Gil approached Baylor, aggressive, like a man on a mission. They exchanged a few words. Baylor said something sharp to him, and Gil stepped back. When he turned and started back towards me, his mouth was shut and his jaw set. Baylor stared after him for a moment, then turned his attention to a pack handler. When Gil reached me, he dragged me off the horse and started untying the ropes. "Boy, you're to stay with me," he said. My heart started hammering in my chest. "If you run," he started again, "I can't kill you." His eyes locked directly onto mine. "But I can make you wish I had." He grabbed his pack off the horse as a handler came and took this skinny thing by the reins to lead it away. He handed the pack to me, then turned me and pushed me on the back of the head. That way. Gil's patchwork shack was located on the far side of the camp, away from the others. It was another sign that he wasn't well liked. He tied the horse up to a sapling, then shoved the door open and pushed me inside. I was already exhausted from the abuse and days of sleeping outside, and the weight of his pack made me fall onto the dirt floor. I remember thinking, at least the dirt was dry. Gil left the door open so he could see while we used a striker to light a lamp. There wasn't much there: the fire pit, a straw mat, and some other odds and ends for cooking. I didn't think there was anything worth stealing, but Gil used the lamp to eye every corner of the room, as if making sure everything was in its place. Once he was satisfied, he took the pack from me and tossed it on the mat. "I know what you're thinking, boy," he told me, "but if you take anything, I will kill you." He put his face close to mine, as if to instill the threat deeper with his eyes. His breath was nauseating. For some reason, I felt offended and told him that I didn't steal. Sometimes children don't know when to keep their mouth closed. He cuffed me and started yelling about being made a nursemaid. I don't know how I survived those years with him. Baylor had appointed him as my tutor, and I spent every day in the camp with him, as well as lived with him for most of that time. His temper, combined with his hatred for me, kept me on edge, and his drinking at night made him unpredictable. He shed his wet clothes and sat down on the mat, pulling a skin of that foul-smelling alcohol that he liked so much from his pack. I sit with my arms wrapped around my knees, watching him. After a few gulps of the skin, he blew out the lamp and lay down. "I'm a light sleeper," he said, with his back to me. In the darkness, I sat. It wasn't long before the sound of the rain on the roof of the shack became louder than his breathing, and I was lulled into a numbing sleep. Okay, we'll stop there and pick up in chapter 5 later.